Our next presenter is Janeen Kochan. She is President, Human Factors Researcher, Instructor Pilot, Aviation Research Training, and with Service, Inc. She is a retired Boeing 767 captain and human factors instructor for a major U.S. airline. She conducts pilot training throughout the world. She has over 20,000 hours of flying time in a variety of aircraft and has type ratings in the B767, 757, DC-8, DC-9, the YS-11, the CVL B-30, and numerous corporate jets. In addition, she holds a current and active airframe and power plant, inspector authorization, flight instructor, and an FAA designated pilot examiner privileges. In addition to providing training and evaluation services to the aviation industry, Dr. Kochan serves as a courtesy instructor of the medical education at the University of Central Florida College of Medicine and is a visiting research professor and an aviation expert in residence for the Drexel University School of Biomedical Engineering, Science and Health Systems. She is an adjunct assistant professor for the Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University worldwide and Polk State College. Dr. Kochan holds a PhD in applied experimental and human factor psychology from the University of Central Florida in Orlando and an MS in industrial and systems engineering from the Ohio State University. Her BA degree was also earned from the Ohio State University in pre-medicine and psychology. I'd like to present our presenter, Janeen Kochan.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. What a gracious introduction, and good morning, and welcome to Sun and Fun's Fun Time and the FAA Safety Center. I really do appreciate that introduction. What I appreciate more is the opportunity to be here and be presenting the Airman Certification Standards work that has been in progress for many, many years. So if we could bring the volume down, thank you very much. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome those of you here in the audience at the Sun and Fun FAA Safety Center, as well as those of you that are participating remotely from around the country, particularly my guests from FAA Washington and the Volpe Center, and some of my other research workers and colleagues. So welcome. This morning's discussion is going to be on the Airman Certification Standards. And what I intend to impart this morning is what is it, or we might want to say what are they, the Airman Certification Standards being plural. Where did it or they come from? How were they generated? Why are we changing? But most importantly for this audience here at Sun and Fun is how does it affect you? And who is the audience and who are you? Well, you are, number one, any student of aviation, which we're all students of aviation, I'm sure, if we're here at Sun and Fun or watching this presentation remotely. But most importantly, students at any certification level, flight instructors, and evaluators, formerly known as designated pilot examiners, aircrew examiners, and training center examiners. We are now all called evaluators. And what you will notice throughout this presentation are some changes in terminology that I want to try to make very, very clear. So this pertains to all of us in aviation because it is all about airman certification. And if we start out with who is an airman, we know that that's not only pilots, but in the future, well, it's not only pilots, but it's also maintenance personnel, dispatchers, flight attendants. So we might see this whole project and this whole program stem from the pilot world into the rest of the airman worlds. And the most important point of this presentation is what can it do for safety? How can it improve safety? It being our new certification standards for airmen, which we've now started for pilots. Okay, where did this come from? Well, first of all, let's talk about some terminology that has come into play in the last, about 5 years, and that is SMS, better known as Safety Management Systems. We've all heard the terms. Some of you are already working at certificate holders that have safety management programs, but this revamp of airman certification is based on a safety management system framework. And for us to understand what the airman certification standards are all about, we need to understand the safety management systems. And I have on the slide here 4 basic tenets, and I'm going to be relating back to these tenets as we talk about the airman certification standards. But these are the important concepts, and these are what we need to really think about when we hear the words SMS, because we hear SMS and next gen and these terms all the time, and I'm not sure that we've built ourselves a good mental model, and more importantly, a shared mental model. I knew I'd get some of those big academic words in here one way or the other. But what I mean by that is what is the concept that you think about when we think about safety management systems? So first of all, we need to talk about the policy. What is the safety policy? And for our work here on the certification standards, we have to talk about aeronautical knowledge, flight proficiency, and risk management, all integrated into how we certify pilots. Okay, so we have to have a policy. What is safety risk management? And I need to say we are now calling that SRM, and many of you probably know SRM is Single Pilot Resource Management. One of the problems with using acronyms is sometimes they mean more than one thing. So I will use the term safety risk management, and these are processes, and you're going to see that word quite often, processes. And this is how we identify the risks, evaluate risks, and determine whether a change in policy or procedure is beneficial or perhaps has unintended consequences. So in other words, when we change the airman certification standards, might sound like a good idea, but are we going to test that new product, if you will, to make sure there are no negative unintended consequences? Then we have safety assurance. You can translate this term into, we're going to find out what works and what doesn't work, but we're not going to leave it on the table for 10 years and talk about it and have telcons over and over and over again. We're going to get it out here to the operational world so that we can make a difference in the safety of our system through our airman certification process. Okay, so safety assurance is prompt and appropriate incorporation of the changes. And you're going to see how the processes that have been implemented recently are affecting that. Then we have safety promotion. And I'm going to talk specifically to my academic colleagues and researchers, because what we don't do well with our research and our programs and information is get it out to the operational world. We are terrible at marketing. We need to improve our communications, how we're getting it out, and that's why I thank the FAA safety team from the Orlando FSDO. We are here in this area fortunate to work with some of the best promoters of safety in the world. But we need to do it more, we need to do it better, and we all need to be safety ambassadors, which requires that we understand the policies, safety risk management, and safety assurance. Airman certifications, ACS, that's where the term comes from. It's built around these core principles of safety management systems, and one of the major features of the new Airman certification standards, and I'm going to use the acronym ACS to mean Airman certification standards, is to bring our aeronautical knowledge evaluations, better known as the written test in the United States, into line with the practical test, with the check ride, better known today as the practical test. And we need to bring those together. It will integrate, as we said, the risk management, that is a part of the Airman certification standards, with safety risk management. Once again, note the acronym. I'm using it to refer to safety risk management instead of single pilot resource management. the ACS incorporates, in other words, includes, expands upon, and supersedes the practical test standards that we all know and love today. I have to ask in the audience, any of you remember the old flight test guide that would fit in our pocket? Doug? Come on, raise your hand. We have an expert in the audience, and he remembers, Doug Stewart remembers the old flight test guides. That was the original, those were the original standards that we had. And then the practical test standards were developed by the FAA. And they were developed to meet the airman certification requirements that I have on this slide. Okay, so years ago, the practical test standards were developed and distributed to the aviation community to be used for practical tests, okay? You'll notice it's practical test standards and now it's airman certification standards, okay? And one of the questions in the question on the subtitle of this presentation is, the new airman certification standards, does it change the check ride? Well, the check ride is properly called the practical test now, and we're foreseeing that it will be called a certification test in the future, okay? The current PTS has not only each area of operation, which is just the flight proficiency right now, it also has in the introduction a lengthy list of special emphasis items. Those special emphasis items were added each time we had some situation that required special attention. In other words, we can probably translate that into anytime we saw a trend in accidents and incidences that we knew we weren't particularly evaluating, we put them in the introduction. In the 1980s, I used to say, my dream is that someday all of the special emphasis items would be in the body of the practical test standards. So this is a dream come true for me, to now take those special emphasis items, specify them, in other words, make them more specific, and put them into the body of the Airman certification standards. In addition, a key component of the Airman certification standards is to correlate the knowledge test questions with the certification test. I know if we use the term long enough, everybody will pick it up and nobody will know who really changed it, okay? So there's never been really a set of metrics or a measurement device or a quality standards or a quality management system standards on checking these questions in the knowledge test. So those knowledge test questions accumulated and stayed on the books, and some of them were out of date, some of them were irrelevant, some of them had mathematical computations that you couldn't get the right answer even if you tried with a mechanical or with a calculator. And the bottom line is that they're disconnected from the real skills and knowledge that is needed, particularly in today's airspace, but even more so in tomorrow's airspace. Next-gen technologies, next-gen procedures are going to require additional skill sets and knowledge and proficiency than our airmen are currently being trained and tested for. Okay. So these new airman certification standards are much more nimble, and they're going to be monitored, and we'll be able to change them much easier. Aren't you getting excited to know what they really are? It's like, okay, get to the point, Janeen. What are they? No, I'm going to tell you all about why these came about, because it's the community, it's the aviation community that we need to come on board with and say, yes, we understand why the change is coming, how the change came about, and what we can benefit, or how we can benefit from them. So a quick overview of the history. We went from the practical test standards to the airman certification standards. Essentially in 2012, there was an aviation rulemaking committee, better known as an ARC. Okay? And the idea was proposed then, and as I said, it incorporates the PTS, it adds to the PTS, and it also adds risk management elements to the PTS. So the specifics of the history, and I know some of you in this audience probably aren't interested in this. However, I'd like to pique your interest in it because I want to talk about your participation in this process of these airman certification standards rolling out into our industry. This started in 2011 with the Aviation Rulemaking Committee. They said, we've got a problem. Our knowledge test questions need to be looked at, and they need to be correlated with the practical tests. The concept was conceived in 2012 and 2013. The ARC had an Aviation Rulemaking Advisory Council, developed the concept further. That council created the Airman Testing Standards and Training Working Group, okay, and there's several of us here that are on those or that have been on that working group. And that particular working group developed the first private instrument and commercial airman certification standards. Yes, I'm going to show you them exactly what they look like. And we also started on the ATP. At that time, if you remember, the ATP certification training program and the regulations for a multi-engine ATP were changing. So that was put aside to be completed later. In the last 2 years, the concept has been refined, and we've also created authorized instructor, formerly known as certified flight instructor, practical test standards, and a prototype of the private ACS has been going on now in the Orlando FSDO for about 9 months. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this prototype. What I mean by a prototype, there are airmen, there are instructors, examiners, and students out using the new ACS as we speak. So, with no further ado, what is it? This is a sample page from the Private Pilot Airman Certification Standard. As you will see, without my laser pointer, oh yeah, there you go. The PTS portion are the skills. This has not been changed. This is an example from the area of operation performance maneuvers. The task is steep turns, and you will see that in the existing practical test standards if you go look at them. But right now, all you see in the PTS are the skill areas and the completion standards. The ACS, on the other hand, has said, oh, by the way, we also want to make sure that we have guidance for the knowledge required and the risk management required. And these risk management elements were found in the introduction to the PTSs, where we used to have the special emphasis items. So now we have specific guidance, specific elements for knowledge, skills, and risk management all in one place, okay? Furthermore, we have on each area of operation, each task, there are codes that replace the learning statement codes on the knowledge test. Used to be when we took a knowledge test, we would get our test results, and I'll show you a picture of it here in just a minute, and we would have learning statement codes that we could go online to the FAA website, and we would have a general idea of what the area of operation, or what the area or topic was that the knowledge test question referred to. Now there will be a specific code that you can go, and each knowledge test question will have an element in the ACS that you will know exactly what the subject matter was. Okay. So there's no more guessing or wondering which of the 5 questions it might have been that the student missed. Okay. And what this is going to be able to do, and this is another topic, is we can align the information and the content of the handbooks that are the reference materials up here, the FAA Handbook 8083-3 and the Pilot Operating Handbook, AFM. Whatever reference materials would guide this steep turn task will be kept up to date. Okay, so it aligns the reference material with the task with the knowledge test question. So it is all integrated. It's in one place. Okay, and if there are changes, everything would get changed. If there is a change to a concept, then they would all get changed at the same time. And as this says, we have better feedback for your students. From the instructor standpoint, let's say we missed a question that had to do with steep turns and accelerated stalls. Well, wait a second, this isn't the stall section. What does that have to do with the steep turn? Well, you can go back and review, and oh, by the way, this is a question that often comes up on practical tests. I'm fortunate enough to have the privilege of being a designated pilot examiner, and this is something that is a good knowledge question when you discuss steep turns. You know, how does stall speed change with bank angle? We can get all the way into aerodynamics about at what speed do we not want to go above, a safe airspeed not to exceed maneuvering speed, VA. Why is that? So we can discuss that. How does maneuvering speed change with weight? Trust me, when I'm in an airplane with someone, we're probably not at gross weight. And how many times do students tell me that, oh, well, then our maneuvering speed's going to be higher? Oh, really? I think we'll go into this topic a little bit further. Okay. As we all know, maneuvering speed decreases with weight, and we can go into the whys and wherefores at our next hangar flying event. These codes, just to point out how specific they are, and this was a brilliant work by primarily Jackie Spanitz of ASA, where she coded these, and we're able to look at, we know that when the private pilot takes their private pilot knowledge test, they get these codes on their knowledge test report, and we can look up that we know that it's private airplane, it's area of operation 5, it's task A, steep turns, and knowledge element 5, accelerated stalls. Okay, so it's very, very, very specific. Okay. So this is what the old computer test report looks like with the codes that were very, very general versus our new Airman Certification Standards codes. Okay. In addition to correlating these knowledge test questions with the Airman Certification Standards elements, there's also a new process of boarding these questions or creating these knowledge test questions, making sure they're number 1, have reference material, number 2, they're relevant, number 3, the choices of answers are appropriate, and they sit and work tirelessly at making sure the knowledge test questions are valid and reliable and relevant. Okay, so if you will already see in the private pilot knowledge test question bank that some of the irrelevant or unnecessary questions have been deleted, and then there'll be new questions coming on. And get the topic that we'll probably see quite a few new knowledge test questions will be in the risk management area. How many risk management questions did we have on the old private pilot knowledge test? Not so very many. Okay. The ACS Exam Review Board has, as do the working groups and the ARCs and the ARACs, all have industry participants. Okay, we are there assisting the FAA. They use our input and their guidance and their oversight to make this product what it is. Okay. And the process, once again, we're looking at processes, we're looking at safety management system processes, create something, make sure it works, make sure there aren't any unintended consequences, and get it out to the operational world. It's the electronic world too. We don't need to wait 3 years to be able to get a new practical test standards revision out. Let's talk a little bit about the reference materials. Okay, most of the reference materials listed for each task are going to remain the same unless we have new ones, and some of the reference materials are probably going to be combined. However, the most important feature is that all of those reference materials are being reviewed and revised as necessary. And once again, there is now a process in place that if there's a mistake or if there's a problem or if there's a concept that isn't covered properly, it will be revised and we'll fix it. And I will tell you, one of the topics that we have been working on to quote unquote fix for a long time addresses the number one problem, the number one killer of pilots at all levels of certification today and last year and the year before and the year before, which is, of course, we all know, loss of control in flight. It's a good audience here. Loss of control in flight. So we are addressing a known problem, because if we were already addressing it so properly and satisfactorily, it still wouldn't be the number one problem. So in the guidance material, in the ACSs, in the elements, the risk management elements, we are making sure that we are addressing the problems of today. And we will be able to address the problems of tomorrow and next gen, because, once again, this is a much more nimble process. The key word here, process. So the key points so far: accept to streamline and combine overlapping tasks. We really don't change the PTS elements or performance metrics. What do we mean by that? We're not changing the plus or minus 100 feet, plus or minus 5 degrees, plus or minus 10 knots, okay, plus or minus 10 degrees of rollout. Those have not been changed, nor have any of the 14 CFR Part 61 requirements been changed. No, there haven't been any added, deleted, or changed. However, what has been added are the important topics of covering the knowledge that you have to have before you can demonstrate the skills, and including an overarching theme of risk management based on safety management systems. Each of the ACSs, even though developed by teams of industry personnel, are reviewed and validated by the FAA. So currently the commercial ACS is being validated, commercial and instrument is being validated by the FAA. We have here the ACS does not change the check ride. Oh yes it does, it at least changes the name to certification test from practical test. And it gives more useful information on the knowledge and risk management and the special emphasis items, which are now in the body of each and every task. Okay. We're also able to correlate the ACS codes that were missed on the knowledge test much more effectively. So those are the key points so far. Let's talk about how the ACS affects you, whether you are a student, operational pilot, instructor pilot, evaluator, or anybody else involved in the aviation system. What we have is more specific and relevant training and evaluation guidance. One of the major changes in this document from the practical test standards is not a change in the content whatsoever, but in the change of how it's suggested to be used. And it's now suggested, although we've always wanted to use the practical test standards with our students to make sure they understood the requirements. But now this is much more of a training document as much as it is a testing document. It does not replace a syllabus. It does not replace a training course outline for a Part 141 or 142 operation. However, it should be used so that each and every student and each and every instructor and each and every evaluator understands the new knowledge and risk management elements that have been included. Okay. So before the PTS was a testing document, the ACS is a training and evaluation document. It's also a document to be used for feedback from the knowledge test questions that may have been missed. So we think it's going to better prepare the students, instructors, and evaluators. But let's look at it this way. How else might it change the certification test? Now that we have risk management elements included. Let me bring up here. Do I have any questions from the audience? Yeah. Okay, let's take a look here. What I would like to do here is I'm just going to share with you. Actually, I will show you this.
Who had a question?
Yes?
Who did?
No questions?
Nobody?
Okay.
If you have a question, raise your hand and keep it up until we get to you with a microphone.
Yes, for questions, we'll ask you to raise your hand, and they'll bring a mic to you. But let us take a look at what the ACS can do for safety. I talked about risk management. Here's another term, favorite term, not a big research term, but a term that's misunderstood. Improve information management. In today's world, with all our electronic devices, we have more information than we could possibly use for the rest of forever on one page on one of our devices. So today's challenge, particularly in our industry, because we have things like time constraints and only a certain amount of attention that we can pay to any one particular item at a time, we need to make sure that we are managing the information that is necessary to be learned and remembered and demonstrated for an airman to be proficient. So we really need to learn how to manage that information. And by way of demonstration of information management, I'm going to share with you how you can manage the information about the Airman certification standards, and I will do that real time here. I'm going to take you to the FAA's training and testing webpage, okay? And I'm going to encourage you to bookmark this. In other words, make it one of your favorite pages. This is the page that's going to keep you up to date. Once again, what is it that we don't do very well? We don't market our research and our research results and items that really pertain to safety very well. However, Susan Parson has really worked hard on this page. We want to keep you up to date. So I'm going to share this page with you real time and make sure you are very familiar with where these documents are. Online, you will see that we have the Private Pilot Airman Certification Standards. Imagine that. It looks very much like the front page of the practical test standards, okay? So this is a draft copy, and this is something you're going to be interested in, the date, to be determined. Is anybody curious what's going to happen and when we're going to be using these? Well, let me cover that right now. I flew by the topic that we have a prototype in progress in the Orlando FAASTeam. What this prototype involves, as I said, are students, instructors, and evaluators, designated pilot examiners, and a training center evaluators, using the Airman certification standards in lieu of the practical test standards for private pilot certification. So the students have enrolled in their private pilot course, and if they had no previous aviation training, they are going to complete their course of private pilot certification using the ACS. The instructors will use the ACS as it is designed to be used. When they take their knowledge test, those in the prototype receive the knowledge test codes that are coded to the ACS. And when they take their certification test with their designated pilot examiner or their training center evaluator, they use the ACS. Once they've used the ACS for their certification process, we have surveys that we are asking them about their experience. So in other words, the search for unintended consequences, or is there some consequences, or is there something we missed when we designed this product, this change? Is it going to work as designed? Or did we miss something that when we take it to the field is going to be problematic? So this is the test case for the first Airman certification standards for the private pilot. So far, so good. The results, we had a case at Embry-Riddle in Daytona last summer, and many tests came out that there weren't any particular problems. The ongoing prototype with the Orlando FAASTeam is going well. The difference today is we're using that process to ensure the safety of the product before we put it out to the field. Okay. Now, so this prototype should be complete this early summer, and we anticipate the private pilot airman certification standards rolling out throughout the country later on in the year. We'll also be prototyping the instrument, the commercial, and the authorized instructor, not only in the Orlando FAASTeam, but in other parts of the world. Even though we know in the Orlando FAASTeam we do more airman certifications than any place else in the world, and that's our thing, particularly authorized instructors. But we're also going to test in some other parts of the country. Therefore, the beta test on these products should find any glitches so that when they're rolled out, all of you, students, instructors, evaluators alike, will want to stay on the FAA's website, here, where I've got this pulled up, and keep in touch with what's going on, okay? So you'll not only have a copy of the Airman certification standards, but you'll have frequently asked questions so that you'll see what's going on, okay? So they're coming. This isn't just theoretical, and this isn't, oh, this will never happen, which I have heard over and over and over again. We worked for years on the products, and people said, oh, well, that's never going to happen. And we're very, very fortunate that in our aviation industry, we realize when change is necessary, and we move forward to do so. So let's go back and talk a little bit about whether the quote-unquote check ride changes when it becomes a certification test. And I'll just briefly scroll through here and let you see that in the new Airman certification standards, the 21 pages of introduction that are in the practical test standards are essentially gone, most of it absorbed into the body of the ACS, but those items some other items that used to be in the introduction are now found in appendices to the ACS. But you will find that we jump right into it. We've got a table of contents, and we go right into, here's the concept, and I cannot encourage you enough to start reading and reviewing this now, okay? Why? Because we want your comments, we want your input, and by yours, we mean everybody's. Each and every one of these ACSs that have not been put out yet, the remainder of them, other than the private, come out for public comment. That is when we have the opportunity to review them and say, wow, that's a really good idea, but did you think of this? And each and every comment that comes from the public is reviewed and considered before we move ahead with publishing the certification standard. Okay. So that is in the Federal Register. You can go online to the FAA website and actually sign up to be notified when something comes out for comment, for public comment from the FAA. And especially researchers should certainly be on that. But those of you interested in airman certification, that is one good way to find out when it comes out for comment. You'll also find it on the frequently asked questions, usually has an update. So anyway, after one page, we're right into area of operation 1, single engine, multi-engine land sea areas of operation. Another change to the ACS is you will notice when you go and compare the PTS to the ACS is that each category and class where it is a common area of operation and task will be combined, okay? If you'll see where if it's only a seaplane item, it will just say single engine C or multi-engine C. Here, pre-flight, it doesn't matter what kind of airplane you're flying, you're going to have the same area of operation, the same tasks. Okay. Once again, each task is going to have the objective, And you'll notice even the objective has changed. Determine that the applicant exhibits satisfactory knowledge, skills, and risk management associated with that task. Airmen and medical certifications, including privileges, etc. So, and this is kind of interesting. Here, the knowledge skills, I'm going to use an example. So, pilot qualifications, so we have to know as airmen about pilot qualifications. And here on the private pilot, ACS, they even talk about endorsements. So let's think about this. A private pilot applicant comes to the designated pilot examiner for their private pilot certification test and does not have the appropriate endorsements. And you think about it and you go, well, that's a flight instructor task, or used to be. And this is where we found it problematic. How would we hold the private pilot responsible for not having the appropriate endorsements? Because no place in the PTS did it say they had to know anything about how to log time in their logbook, in particular, particularly about endorsements. So now that we have the specific knowledge, when you go to prepare your private pilot for their training, which I would hope this would be day one, that they would see their certification standards. Now we have specifics so that we make sure that those gaps in knowledge that we would see in the past should be mitigated. We have offered you the guidance to be able to make sure that your private pilot applicant understands the endorsements that he or she should have in their logbook when they come for a practical test. Now, if you're looking at me like, well, how could that happen? I don't know. I've got a better question. How could a flight instructor for an additional rating come to a practical test without the endorsement? Especially when you look at the task rating table and items B and M are the ones that are required, and it is endorsements. One of the items of the two in that area of operation for an additional flight instructor rating is endorsements, and you're going to show up without an endorsement in your logbook. You can't make this stuff up. So, once again, even then, that was in the practical test standards. So we're trying to be more specific. How does this change? How does it change the certification test? So anyway, I will go down here, and I'm going to talk a little bit more of how it might change the certification test. Does anybody remember what task steep turns was in? Oh, I'm sorry, area of operation. I said 5. Steep turns. One of the requirements since 5 years ago in FAA Order 8900.2, if you're interested, you might want to write that down if you aren't very familiar with it. Just Google FSIMS FAA 8900.2, and you will find the guidance that designated pilot examiners, or that evaluators, use. That is our guidance that we use to conduct practical, now certification tests. So we'll use the Airman certification standards, the certification tests, and the reference documents that are referred to in the ACS, and we'll conduct the certification test. Order 8900.2 over 5 years ago said, by the way, as much as possible, this practical test should be conducted using scenarios. So that's a great idea. The reason being, it will allow our applicants to better demonstrate their knowledge, skills, and abilities based on real-world situations. Okay. And this really stems from the way back in the airline world. We conducted line-oriented flight training starting in the 1980s, where we came up with scenarios, and they would fly scenarios and be evaluated during the scenarios. So here, steep turns, can we come up with a scenario that a steep turn might be incorporated into? Maybe yes, maybe no, but nevertheless, we could take the steep turn task, and once we thoroughly investigate the knowledge, skills, and risk management features, that student or applicant should be able to take that conceptual knowledge and apply it to other situations. So, for example, if we go down to the risk management elements. How are we going to train and evaluate, dividing attention between the airplane control and orientation? What is task management? What is energy management? What about stall spin awareness? So I'm going to go back to the leading cause of fatalities in all areas of aviation is loss of control in flight. And whether it's a stall spin from a slow speed regime of flight, or is an accelerated stall spin from getting into a steep bank and initiating their stall spin from that condition. So once again, how do we relate the concepts in the Airman certification standards to the real world? And we now have the elements. Energy management and stall spin awareness were not specific elements that we trained and tested in the past. Okay. So I urge you to go through the Airman certification standard, the private pilot, because you will see the format is not going to change. Once you understand the concept, the Airman certification standards concept, you will understand the different certification standards for commercial instrument authorized instructor. Okay? So, let me come back here and finish up with key points here. Will the check ride change? Okay. Once again, the name's probably going to change. Specifically, the elements, plus or minus 100 feet, plus or minus 5 degrees, that is not going to change. But the flavor, the atmosphere, and all will probably change. So this is an integrated and systematic approach that will now be incorporated. We've got better guidance to everyone, and I've included here inspectors for FAA inspectors. We're developing better test questions. They're tied to the standards, and they're supported by the handbooks. And one of the areas that is of great problems in airman testing, evaluations, is subjectivity. We could have a whole discussion on which evaluator is selected for your students, or who we're going to send the student to for their check ride based on how the evaluator conducts the check ride, or what the special emphasis items are. And this should reduce subjectivity and increase standardization across the whole system. Okay, we are a system. Okay. And we want to make sure that the standards, guidance, and testing work together effectively. And all of the testing, the knowledge testing, the oral testing, the on-aircraft or simulator testing, that we have the guidance necessary. That guidance is kept timely. If there's a problem with it, it's identified, and the data will roll back into it. And if we see there's an area of operation or a task that has a high failure rate, we can go back and say, we really need to take a better look at this, and perhaps we're missing something in the training or testing of that particular element. Okay. So that is an overview of the Airman certification standards, how it applies. It is coming. This is not theoretical, and it is up to all of us in the industry to make sure we're very, very familiar with it. I know there's been questions about where do I find out more about this. First of all, on the training and testing area of the FAA website. There will also be online training and I'm hoping that you are all signed up for WINGS on FAASTeam.gov. There will be, there already is one training program that has these slides and some more that also have notes on it. You can use that program. You can present it at your flight school. You can present it to your students so that they are aware of what is coming and how things are going to change. Okay. Are there questions about the Airman certification standards?
Dr. Kochan, I have a question. Microphone 1. Microphone number 1.
Mic 1, please.
Microphone number 1, please. Microphone number 1. control room.
And automation management is also something. This is such a great example. I really love unexpected events because it makes us take a look and say, do we really need this microphone, or can we handle this situation just by shouting?
Dr. Kochan, you have a PhD in unexpected events.
I do have a PhD in, I think I am the unexpected event, yes.
Number one.
Thank
Test.
you.
Okay. Dr. Kochan, I'm a chief instructor at a 141 school, and you've just told me that my world is about to change. I have all these TCOs lined up on the shelf. Am I going to have to rewrite them because of Airman certification standards?
That is an excellent question, and darn, I am going to get that slide back in this presentation one way or the other. Thank you, Bob Jex. The same question I got last time because I forgot to put that slide in there. Oh my gosh, human error, what can we say? That was an error of omission, okay? An error of omission, sorry about that. Dr. Reason, we'll try to, good question, Bob, I really appreciate that. If you're a 141 school and you have your training course outlines, they're all done, approved, and you look at this and you go, oh my, am I going to have to change them? The answer is not yet, and not now, and not in rapid succession. What you will see is your TCOs will still be usable. Your TCOs will still be usable, and so you aren't going to have to go out when the private pilot ACS comes out later this year and say, oh, I need to change my private TCO. However, and this is a non-FAA sponsored comment, from a practical standpoint, I would urge you to schedule in review and revision for your TCOs as these ACSs are rolled out, because you're going to want to incorporate these new features in your TCOs. For now, they're not required because what you have from the skills section, all you have generally is are the skills section. And you may already have the risk management elements in there. However, consider scheduling time with your course developers over the next years to take a look and review and perhaps plan on your revisions as those come out. Remember, we also have inspectors that are going to have to approve those revisions. So if we can make it a process, if you will, that we can start with the private and you take a look and see how you might want to review and revise those. That would be, once again, this is a personal encouragement. This is not, FAA didn't say go do this, but if we just think ahead, just like next gen, think ahead, with what's coming. So excellent question, but for now, 141 TCOs are not required to be changed. Very, very good question. Any other questions? Yes. Microphone, please.
Will there be much of an impact on the FAA training handbooks as far as like the airplane flying handbook and the PHAC? Will there integrating, more risk management into it?
Okay, good question. As we've been reviewing the FAA handbooks, and the working groups are also participating in those reviews. For example, the risk management handbook has been thoroughly reviewed and it will be out for rewrite. And all of the handbooks are being reviewed to make sure that the elements, the knowledge test questions and the elements in the ACSs are covered in those handbooks. Our favorite topic, loss of control in flight, has its own chapter in the airplane flying handbook. And, information that some of us have been saying, well, it'll be out shortly. We'll get that information out shortly. So we'll have that information. There are major revisions coming out to the FAA handbooks. So keep your eyes open for those. Once again, part of a safety management system is feedback from the users. Okay, a safety management system. Take care of the little things and the big things take care of themselves. Thank you, Grandmother Sally. She taught me that when I was a kid, and she's absolutely right. Take care of the little things and the big things will take care of themselves. How big is an oil leak? Is that it's not that bad? Well, how bad is it? So feedback for our handbooks, if you see an error or something that doesn't look right, look at the errata sheets today for our handbooks on the FAA website. And if you're not making sure that those sheets go with your PHAC and your airplane flying handbook and your instrument flying handbook, you're going to have a lot of problems with some of your knowledge from your students. But now we're, being electronic, being able to be more timely with revisions, and knowing what what we've been missing perhaps, that is being included. As a matter of fact, the Instrument Procedures Handbook and the Instrument Flying Handbook will probably be combined. But once again, look at the drafts when they come out in draft form and give us feedback. Read it, use it. There might be 20 of us that have read and reviewed it, but you know what? We've been reading it and reviewing it a lot, and we still forget to put the slide in there, okay? So we're all human, we all make errors, and to make a system safer takes everybody's participation. It's not my job, or not that you don't want to be the one to always be writing the email to the, whomever it is that you've seen an error. You see an error in this program, you hear me say something that isn't right, email me, call me, let me know. We're on a practical test and it doesn't sound right. We need to look it up. And if we look it up and we look and you say, that just doesn't seem right, it doesn't mean that particular document, by the way, information management, valid, reliable documentation. Oh, if I've said that once or twice or three times, valid, reliable documentation. Make sure that even our documentation has a quality management component to it, and it takes every single one of us in this system, pilots, mechanics, air traffic controllers, dispatchers, cabin crew, oversight, all of us, to make our system safer, okay? It sounds like a big daunting task, but when we all take care of the little things, the big things will take care of themselves. Any other questions? All right, I thank you very much. I thank the FAA for the privilege to be here and speak with you all, and I hope we have a great show this year, and let's all keep it safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kochan. Thank you. For all of you out there in the audience,